You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way. Cade Mila Vulture, you son of a gun.
Welcome to the party. I'm Warlord Scarr, dual wielder of death and destruction.
And I'm SavageMick, and my underpants are behind enemy lines.
And we're here to talk about an archetype that has existed in mythology for millennia and always captured a major part of the human spirit and the idea of adventuring and heroics. Yet we can't seem to find any damned way to make that character in our popular fantasy RPGs. We are, of course, talking about the Ranger, bedeviled as it is by Hunter's Mark, animal companions, spellcasting, and other ill-gotten mechanics.
Wait, hold on a second. There's a couple of things there. Thousands of years, really? I mean, Rangers... How many examples can we... Just off the top of your head, how many examples can you think of?
The Finn McCool and the Fianna? That sounds like...
You've got me there. Yes, the Fianna... Or actually, they're even name-checked in TV Tropes, which has a page on Rangers, most of which are army units, which I think is kind of unusual. And then there's, of course, the Texas Rangers, of which they're the most feared Ranger, probably outside of Lord of the Rings, is, of course, Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
Different kind of Ranger. Although hit the mic there. The theme tune to Walker, Texas Ranger, the lyrics do kind of sum it up. I'm going to read them out, and these are showing up in the show notes. I won't attempt to sing it. Chuck Norris sings the original, and we know how that'd go. So in the eyes of a ranger, the unsuspecting stranger had better know the truth of wrong from right. Lovely. Because the eyes of the ranger are upon you. Any wrong you do, he's going to see. When you're in Texas, look behind you, because that's where the ranger's going to be. And then yeehaw and roundhouse kicks. Repeat until the episode is over. So, the ranger... and then, so we've got the Fianna, which were an order of knights that kind of lived off the land in Celtic Ireland.
They were what we would consider traditional. In the modern day, we could view them very much in the knightly things. They were the bonded warriors of the High King of Ireland back when the mythical times and Ireland was completely united and so forth. And the five lesser kings or five province kings looked up to the High King in Meath and all this other nonsense, and it's all put back together from fragmented stories, etc., etc. But
Oscar Wilde made a bunch of stuff up. It was great. We had a great time. We got our mythology at IKEA. We built it ourselves.
We kind of had to. There wasn't much left. But that's the thing is that they were in terms of social role, they would look like a set of knights, but because the Ireland where those stories were originally told was a very much more nature-driven place because it was covered in dense forests, and the individual settlements would often be, miles apart with, trackless.
They wouldn't be points of light in a wilderness by any chance, would they?
I think you could say that they are points of light in a wilderness, yes. And that meant that the theme of the Fianna was a lot more rural, about being a master of nature rather than just, having shiny armor and a big sword. They were meant to be fast, able to track people through the wilderness, able to move through the wilderness unimpeded. I think the line is you had to run through the forest from dusk till dawn without, displacing a single leaf or something like that. The mythology that they were working with was one where to be a master of nature was the ultimate expression of being a skilled warrior, as opposed to simply, being a brute and, charging on forward.
Yeah, not berserkers, as you say, masters of the wild, uh, endlessly endure the rigors of crossing wooded land, and of course protecting those points of light. And that sort of filters through to some of the better known interpretations of, say, fantasy style rangers. Robin Hood a ranger?
You could make the argument. He certainly got similar. He was originally a knight, and then he was forced to become a master of the wild in order to bring the true king's justice to those who would subvert him, etc., etc. So there's a certain element of that. But notably, the social context is a bit different because Sherwood Forest wasn't like wild frontier lands like later versions, like the Texas Rangers would have been meant to be sort of, they would be understood as explorers, or the first wave of looking after a wide range of things. Sherwood Forest was known lands surrounded by what we call civilized lands. It's just that no one could get into the damn forest because it was so big, and no one could map it because maps had barely been invented at that point. So, yeah, but you're sort of dealing with similar things. It's like that there are wild places between the points light, as you put it, and the ranger is this sort of semi-roguish but also semi-knightly figure that it has the underhandness of all things that are outside civilization, but also the heart of a civilized man, or you can rephrase it as you will, but that sort of an underlying feeling is like the ranger is very much a person who is a foot in both worlds.
Yeah, they roam those borderlands to make sure that everything stays the right side of the line. I've always thought that was pretty foundational to the kind of the ranger fantasy. And there's this, I think, in both the Fianna, the Texas Rangers, and that sort of idea of a wilderness ranger, there is a certain law and order aspect. You don't often, I mean, it's not something that tends to get played up much, but there's a sort of a wilderness policeman. If there's a savage beast attacking farmsteads, then ranger is presumably the one you call to track it and then kill it. Yeah, that's kind of it. Now, of course, some of the most famous rangers in fantasy would be depicted in the Lord of the Rings, where we get that one guy who is the class. Well, one of that one guys, and that's the Duodan Rangers.
Dunedain. It's this one of those wonderful mixes of Welsh and Old English that Tolkien put together into his own language, because the guy made up new languages as a hobby. But yes, this Dunedain Rangers, the leader of which was Aragorn, secretly the rightful king of both the North and the South, but
Robin Hood. Hidden nobility.
And
the Rangers of Ithilien were led by Faramir, who was Boromir's brother.
Yeah, I think so.
So they're both outranged. Now, if I recall correctly, they were both kind of border rangers. They were patrolling to make sure that stuff from Mordor and the Darklands didn't creep over the border. So again, looking out for monstrosities, keeping civilized places safe by being on the picket line, I suppose, being on the leading edge, the frontier.
Yeah, dealing in that same mythological space, though it's a little bit more confused when it comes to Tolkien, because he has this kind of, he's trying to kind of have it that the lands of Mordor, the Darklands, are both the savage wilderness, but also behind it all is all those factories and the orc coop machine that Saruman makes, because in Tolkien's mind, the perfect civilization is a kind of pastoral wilderness with nobles and estates running over vast fields of something or other, probably tobacco. Anyway, but we're trying to get I think the topic is that because the Ranger, there's been a very hard attempt to make the Ranger seem like this, noble figure, as opposed to just being a thief that likes leaves instead of alleyways.
Some grubby guy who can cook everything in one pot.
Yeah.
We're not done yet though, because obviously that one guy who is, we're getting ever so slightly closer to the D&D Ranger here, is what's his name with the two swords, two cats? Who's got two swords, two cats? This guy, or is it one cat?
I think it's one cat, although maybe he has a variety of friends. No one who I can remember the names. I think one was called Brunor, and there's a
Never
lady.
read. I've
Yeah.
actually only know this guy by name. He is, of course, I'm going to mangle this. Is it Drizzit? Drizzed?
I mean, I'm sure there's been many an internet argument over that. But yes, Drizz's Duarden, presumably, our puny mortal Mon Kaitongs cannot pronounce it the proper Elven, etc. But yes, this was an interesting expression of a novel character sort of coming together into a couple of different ways as they were trying to express, oh, this guy can be a ranger. It was originally Drizzard, despite being a cliche now, because the big thing was he was a drow, a creature that was a type of elf that was monsters. You can't have them as a heroic player character, blah, blah, blah. And it was mind blowing in like the late 80s or early 90s or whatever. It's apparently it spawned a counter wave of clones of this. I do always find it weird that Drizzit was the one that kept getting clones made of him, and not say all of the Dragonlance characters. You never hear about like Raistlin clones or Tasselhoff clones, even though everyone complains about.
I think they're actually quite archetypical. Like anyone who's ever played a Hobbit or some sort of halfling is of course annoying, and all wizards tend towards evil. It's just a given. It's all that power. It can't be helped. But Drizzt is this sort of it becomes a bit of a cliche. The outcast with a heart of gold. I mean, Blade is basically the same idea. He's a vampire, but he's a good guy.
Yeah.
He's a bad one, or they are a bad one, but also goody is kind of playing in that arena. But I only bring him up because he's the other sort of other kind of, oh yeah, Ranger. When you say Ranger, people go, yeah, Aragorn, Drizzt. I'd like to make a case for anyone who's familiar with the Lone Wolf book series. I think it's we could say that Lone Wolf is a Ranger. I mean, I know he comes from a monastery.
The Lone Wolf is got much like the books where it's Lone Wolf stars, or he has a thumb in many pages.
Yeah, it's a Lone Wolf book series written by Joe Dever. Long running book series, all available at Project Aeon, AON, to play for free. Highly recommend. But if you look at the cover of that first book, it's just this green cloaked, rangy looking dude. Rangy as in physique, staring out from under his cowl. And you spend most of your time as Lone Wolf, especially in the early books, scrambling through ditches, over ravines, forests, and places like that. And as makes most sense to those who are deep inside the Ranger fantasy, probably the most dangerous place you can go are settlements. The place that are most likely to get you killed. I remember being invited in for soup by some monks once, and that didn't end up very well.
Yeah. And then there's a certain level of where he gains the sword of ultimate likely destruction and also psychic powers, but we can get into
you can't finish the second book without it. So it's his whole shtick. He's a sword ranger. Is Aragorn's a sword ranger as well? I mean, I know his sword is broken. Is Drizzit the one that brings in the bow play? But he's
the scimitar guy.
Where does the bow come from?
So here's where we divert. Finally, 17 minutes into the recording, we divert.
Okay, let's start with D&D then.
Okay, so the original D&D Ranger, as far as I can recall, and it's been a while since I found the article, various articles breaking this down, but the original Ranger was one of the fan RPG classes that came up in the various fan magazines of the original D&D, and the attempt seems to have been very much take the early Paladin class and make it Rangery. Or make it, sorry, actually, make it Aragorn, because the Paladin wasn't exactly Aragorn enough. So what you have is this weird class, which is almost attempting to model the part in Return of the King, where Aragorn gets out of his manky brown cloak and puts on armor. Because like one of the original first few levels, you would gain all these usual bonuses, favorite enemy, tracking, etc. But you at like level 10 or something, you would suddenly you would only be allowed to have animal companions. You couldn't have henchmen, which was a big mechanic back in original D&D, until you got to a certain level where all of a sudden you got heavy armor proficiency. You could have a whole army behind you, and
the undead
these
from the Barrowlands. They were kick-ass all the way through. As you say, they were a bit of a fan favorite. Rangers in first AD&D, they start the career with 2 hit dice rather than 1. They got a 90% base tracking chance.
Yeah.
Like off the go. So you had a Ranger in your party. You were not losing that trail. And big bonus to sneak up on people as well. They were quite sneaky from the drop. But they also got big damage bonuses against lots of humanoid monsters, I think.
Yeah.
Which, becomes, and these are all like, you can recognize some of the stuff as it's moved through the different editions, but they were just straight up busted to begin with.
Yeah.
And of course they could get druid spells and magic user spells, wizard spells.
Yeah, that was the thing. It was because it was based on Paladin as its power level scaling, and the original Paladin, to make up for its stupid stat requirements. The original Paladin was all kinds of busted. So much the same, the Ranger ended up having things where, like, it had very we would consider almost non-problems today, like the lack of henchmen, because a lot of people would be very happy to give up henchmen's 1 through 37 in order to have one cool dog.
Oh, of course. Driz is the person we can blame for the animal companion shtick.
Yeah, and for the dual wielding is actually thing, because the dual wielding was actually not a ranger thing; it was a drow thing. Drow, of course, needed, because they were late game enemies in one of Gygax's campaigns. They needed to have all kinds of cool busted abilities. One of them was dual wielding, which no PC class could do at the time. So when Mr. R.A. Salvatore decided he was going to have a cool new protagonist who defied,
baby.
Yeah, he just got dual scimitar wielding, and he mainly defined all these racist accusations against them through the medium of being super duper cool. And yes, he got. I believe I actually did read 2 of the 3 Origin of Drizzt books. The one where you see just how much of a nonsense cackling evil society Mensa Branson is, and the one where he wanders around the Underdark for a couple of months, mostly meeting people who have been turned into other things and watching them slowly go insane. It's a bit of a weird book. I don't think that they had quite enough material for a trilogy. But yes, this is where he I think kills a wizard, either one of the rival. He kills a wizard and gets this figurine of wondrous power that turns into a animal companion for him, and he names it Gwyn, something Welsh, and that is one of his cool things, is that he has the ability to summon his animal companion as well.
So animal companion locked in, dual wielding locked in, and I gotta say, I think at some point some executive went, "Why has the ranger got no ranged attacks?" And so they stuck a bow on. Like, I fundamentally, I think that's probably where that comes from. Or Robin Hood.
The Robin Hood to a certain extent, because I don't think thieves ever got like really good at target shooting. So yeah, they're just. I guess they just had never. They presumably in the jumble of mechanics that was late second ed, they found themselves naturally gravitating to the ranger being the bow class rather than thing. And this was before they'd codified the Drizidisms into actually being part of the class. But it was third ed, much like see previous episode where third ed codified a lot of the various ideas for bards and druids into the forms we kind of know them as today. Third ed was where they took all of the iconic quote unquote elements of a ranger, which would have been the choice between dual wielding or bows, and also the having an animal companion thing, and just made those part of the mechanical identity of the class. Even though those are very much D&D isms as opposed to Fianna isms, I guess it was like having an animal companion as a ranger is basically mandatory unless you're messing around with like Tashes or the third ed would be the unearthed arcana variant rules. And some people who did because scaling, animal companions being weird. Not everyone actually wants a dog.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You're better off the flying animal. Like, I can't remember the last time. Oh, no, wait, I do know of a ranger with it's usually animal companions tend to be flyers these days. It's just more convenient all around. And there's less poop to clean up.
yeah, like it's the classic familiar problem where they would give like magic users familiars and give a whole million reasons why having a familiar is just this massive drawback, and then people stop using familiars. So then they relented and just made, you get a familiar by casting a spell, you can have a million familiars, don't worry about it. And all of a sudden, GMs are now complaining about the original problem, which was everyone sending out their familiar in perfect safety to scout out every single enemy position, so that the party always gets the drop on them, which is why all those horrible, you lose 5 hit points and half a level every time your familiar dies. Penalties were put there in the first place.
Right, yeah.
But
okay, so like third ed D&D, last time that the ranger was kind of competitive, because let's face it, we're now going to talk about what happened. What happened, my boy Ranger?
Competitive is a strong word. I distinctly recall many a ranger fought. The thing about the ranger was it was sort of attempting to be a DPS class, but it didn't have the. It was a bit of a glass cannon. Like if you built your ranger correctly and had well, first off, if you had a bow and all the broken bow classes and you just sit in the back, sniping people down, you were probably fine. If you're attempting to do a dual wielding ranger, you better optimize to hell so that you can literally vaporize everything in front of you like a maddened food processor, or otherwise they would look at you funny and you disintegrate yourself. I played a few rangers, and the lack of AC really, really meant your hit points did not go too far.
Yeah, you better like Walker, be right behind them when you start the fight.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Which I guess it works. It kind of works for me. It speaks to striking from the shadows, laying an ambush, stalking and hunting, rather than toe to toe on the front line. That plays into the ranger mystique.
Yeah, but then the third ed mechanics kind of failed you with that because
100%, yeah.
If you didn't have a sneak attack dice, that skulking in the tree line thing would just give you like +2 to hit, and that helped with all the many of arrows you'd be firing, but it didn't necessarily make you feel like, a wilderness sniper like some people want to be, which is the reason I think why one of the variant classes that came out was the wilderness rogue, so that you could do a lot of the rangery stuff, but also really indulge in your ghillie suit sniper fantasies as well.
Very true. Okay, Hunter's Mark.
Okay. Hunter's Mark is a difficult one because it doesn't appear, I'm pretty sure, until 4th edition, and in 4th edition it's showed up because they've realized that they've sort of flanderized a different element of the Ranger. And now here's the point where we get into the spicy racism part. So
yeah, okay. Wait, what? Where are you going with this?
All right, so you mentioned earlier in the original thing of the thing, instead of the smite evil ability that a paladin used willy-nilly smacking everyone, the ranger got the ability to have big bonuses to hit and damage against enemies of the wild / civilization, by which they would mean humanoid enemies, by which they would mean it didn't actually say. It was understood by the designers that humanoid enemies meant orcs, ogres, goblins, giants, and other bad things in the monster manual that have 2 arms and 2 legs. That was what they sort of understood, but it wasn't, I don't think, terribly well. Nothing in first edition AD&D was particularly terribly well explained, so that was hardly unusual. But that was the vibe they were going for. The idea that there was this big chunk of the monster manual that the ranger just had bonuses against that they considered thematic, because obviously orcs aren't one with nature. That's ridiculous. They're made in goop by Saruman.
And also in these villages with children, but never mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's see this is the okay. Go on. Role playing really is a bit of a potpourri. Like this, when you get down to the sources, things just get transposed in weird ways, and all of a sudden, we're doing a racism. But
yeah,
yeah,
like this is one of those things where it didn't through first ed and presumably second ed, they were able to get by on this. People would eventually start asking questions about it. But even in third ed, because third ed was just an attempt to make second ed work properly, they didn't see this. Still didn't see this as a problem. The 90s were still strong with this one, and they instead of the reason the problem was, we're specifically calling out orcs and goblins as being a thing. First off, they're trying to balance it because the original version was busted. But also they said, well, you can't just lock in every ranger to automatically hate this grouping. You have to give people choices, and so we got the favorite enemy mechanic, where certain all the different monster types in the monster manual were broken down. If you were broken down further, because it'd be too good if you could kill everything with 2 arms and 2 legs. So humanoid was siloed off into the various species, and the idea was slowly over the course of their levels, the ranger would build up a repertoire of people that they were good at shooting or stabbing,
and places they were really good at doing ranger stuff as well. That's not favorite terrain.
A favorite terrain was there. I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I think it took until 3.5 to develop that.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was in the background as having, what do you mean there's a ranger for every, you can walk across the world? That's ridiculous.
So make your choices at character creation at the start of this campaign, and let's just hope that we don't deviate wildly from fighting X in Y.
Yeah, because it was entirely possible for you to go first level. I pick favorite enemy golems because we're fighting golems, and at the third level, I pick favorite enemy bears because we're fighting the master of all bears or something. And then you never fight a single goblin or bear again for the rest of the game.
Until you get to 2011, face an army of goblin riding bears, and it's like, yes, I'm back. But yeah, goblin riding bears, bear, yeah, goblin. Okay, never mind.
I mean,
There's
bear
a
riding
picture.
goblins would be very different.
And very Warhammer, but we won't talk about those people. Those people are great.
But yes,
Right.
basically they had this major mechanic that was thematic and spoke to the Ranger as being this specific defender of specific lands, but it is a teensy bit racist in the world where people were saying that they wanted playable versions of every monster in the game, and in fact a major supplement for the game had been specifically released to make every monster in the monster manual playable. We'll get into that some other time.
This is why furries make everything worse. Okay. Your RPG, your anime, your local politics. Say no to furries.
Anyway,
Humans first. Oh wait, did I go too far? Oh no.
anyway, basically they basically attempted to make an interesting mechanic for Rangers and failed a bit, and made it something that was had implications, but also just didn't work out in actual play because different CRs in the monster manual had different purposes now because of the way. Like it wasn't like in a first aid campaign, you might assume that you'll still be fighting goblins at level 10. You'll just be fighting 57 goblins with a goblin king, and they're all riding spiders or whatever. But
Cool.
this was no longer true in the tightly CR adjusted time of third ed, and goblins past level 3 were just not even an option as a viable threat. So now, what was a locked-in character choice was just making your character weaker over time. See also all the various trap feat choices.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Oh
so
man, 3.5.
It was a time. But yes, fourth ed, of course, set out to fix all these problems. We've already had many an episode in fourth ed. Let's not get into the specifics. Let's just focus on what they did with the Ranger. And what they did with the Ranger was they tried to specifically mark down the Ranger as being, like the Thief, a high damage class. The Thief and the Barbarian, high damage class. And it is the niche was the class that did a lot of attacks, even though this was a one attack per turn meta, as it were. So it was this was the class of you like rolling dice, well, this is the dice rolling class. And they're like every other fourth ed, because fourth ed classes that were in the same role in the party, all the strikers in this case, all had their special mechanic for adding damage to their attacks. And for Rangers, this was, I don't know if it was actually called Hunter's Mark, but it was very similar idea. Was you mark a specific enemy, and that is your kill target enemy. And because you have so many attacks,
they were just borrowing stuff from World of Warcraft at this stage, so I think they almost definitely called it Hunter's Mark. I'm pretty sure they did. I spent most of my fourth ed playing a paladin, a dragonborn paladin. So see previous furries comment. Scales don't count, right? I'm good. Lizard folk longest. Barsoom forever. Lizard folk ascendant. We've come for your women and your oxygen or something, or your gravity. I can't remember. Okay, so
wonderful episode. We're doing so great. But yes, this was the trick of the Ranger was as their encounter power, they would mark an enemy in the melee and say, "This is my target, and I am going to chew through its vastly inflated hit points very efficiently because I have 3 times the attacks of everyone else, and every time I hit, I do an extra D6 or D8 damage, depending on which tier you were in." And that was their thing. And I think they probably did it rather well, considering it was 4th Edition Ranger was one of the was infamous for having its one of the first big infinite combos of 4th Ed. What was his name? Ratata Kenshiro the Orcus Slayer, I think was his name. But it was this.
Hell of a memory on you,
I,
Warlord, I'll tell you that.
I,
I suppose.
I, I I was perennially online, but yes, it was the idea of basically you take a power which was you keep attacking until you miss, and you combine that with a power which was you get +1 hit every time you hit, and combine the two and just basically get infinite attacks. And you kill the biggest monster in the game, which was Orcus at the time.
Okay.
And
Yeah. It's beloved of D&D TikTok these days to come up with crazy combos, but I'm glad to see that they got to
it
start
was,
back
but this was
when vines were a thing.
this was fourth ed, where everything that the game did that was that other editions loved. This was a mistake in fourth ed, but anyway. But yes, other than the general issues around fourth ed, I think fourth ed Ranger probably turned out okay. It might not have been the optimal striker in the end up as the thing because fourth ed was very mechanistic. It sort of called out to people to optimize it, and I suspect it would not have taken more than one or two extra classes that had like 5% extra damage per round on average to basically dethrone Ranger as a thing. I think I don't know if I got the final class tier list, but I think there was something called Avenger, which is like combination Paladin Assassin. That I think was the ultimate striker, and therefore kind of dethroned all the thieves and barbarians and rangers. And again, this is a lot of this is running off memory. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
Well, no, this is it. It can be hard to find detailed information on previous editions of D&D.
yeah, because it was all on the WotC forums, and those were deleted like five months into the fourth ed's life because criticism is so cringe, yo.
You ever read the comment sections on spells on D&D Beyond?
No,
It's pretty wild. It's a lot of the same flavor. It's yeah.
yeah.
Right. So, fourth ed ranger, we've established Hunter's Mark as being a way of keeping your damage up with the top tier strikers.
Mm-hmm.
We've got obviously we've folded in the animal companion stuff. That's kind of a given now. And at that, like animal companions are kind of a whole thing at this point. Artificer had come along in 3.5 with Eberron. And if I recall, the better Artificer builds were the ones that used basically an animal companion proxy of a sort of a construct that would follow you around. You'd upgrade. So animal companions were kind of having a bit of a moment. And of course, there was lots and lots of kicking around from 3.5, depending on your different avenues to getting one, be you druid or magic user or had a familiar, whatever. Fourth ed, yeah, the Hunter's Mark thing. We've established through lore and pop culture sort of fold-ins. We've got our dual wielding or our ranged, bow ranger. Those are our kind of our options. And then we roll into fifth ed. Of course, we've also established that. Now, one thing I just want to, so that although you kind of favor terrain, exploration stuff, like that's there in Ranger from the get-go.
Yeah,
more or less. Now, it gets more and more. I think the problem is it gets more and more codified, and as you say, in 3.5, it really kind of starts to get overtuned. It's like, well, you're a ranger. What kind of ranger are you? What kind of snow are you specialized on?
yeah.
What side of the sand dune are you going to be able to track on? And that, unfortunately, kind of keeps going, which starts to make rangers incredibly. Primarily, the two problems I see there are: A, people are getting away from Wes March's hex crawl style games, arguably since the end of second ed, which is where all of this ranger stuff is kind of meant to really shine. And you're more likely to see it than not in a campaign as you head off into the wilderness, or you have to, or you're on a frontier, you're trying to establish your own bastion or keep on the borderland, and you're no longer crawling through hexes by the time we kind of get to 3.5.
Yeah.
So that kind of keeps getting marginalized, crunched down, or the designers are trying to find ways to make it relevant, but it ends up being quite bland and a bit. Well, this never really applies in it. No one cares about this.
I think one of
how
the
often?
big missteps they made in third ed was they're trying to, as I say, codify this. Is they made a mistake with certain classes by basically trying to give them, you are the only one who's good at this powers. The classic example is the rogue was the only one who could detect or even attempt to disarm any complicated trap over like the basic. It was more complicated than a wire snare. Only a rogue could really do anything about it, and this cut off a lot of the ability for other players to be skilled. Ranger had a similar thing, is that there was a specific feat for tracking, and the only people who got automatically were Rangers. Everyone else had to use up one of their feat slots in order to be able to track. It didn't matter if you had like I think there was an exception if you had like scent powers and you were able to track people by scent, but that was
So why on earth wouldn't a barbarian or a druid have some proficiency in that? Like, that's kind of also part of their shtick. Being able to track in the wilderness or simply navigate in the wilderness efficiently.
Well, here's the thing. Now look at fifth ed, where what's the thing for tracking? Oh, you roll your survival skill. Well, anyone can pick survival with their background skill pick or their feats, and that means that anyone unless you have a specific thing to give the ranger a leg up, anyone could track as well as a ranger. So what they did is they tried to give rangers a leg up with the favorite terrain mechanic. But that is what appears in some instances to be a bonus actually turns out to be kind of a negative, because it means you have an entire section of your character sheet dedicated to a mechanic that only applies if you're doing very specific things in your campaign, which, as we've established, a lot of campaigns don't even bother with.
No. Neither campaigns that are being run amongst various groups or even published campaigns. The last published campaign, the last couple that were probably ranger friendly, is out of the depths.
Yeah, where
you go, I'm a ranger. I just happen to pick Underdark as my favorite terrain.
Yeah, I don't think many I don't think many rangers that specialize in deserts got a good time in out of the wilds.
I played that campaign. The first half is like, if you don't have a ranger specialized in Underdark, you're going to spend a lot of time eating cold mushrooms and not much else.
Yeah, but like there was an awful lot of what we would call traveling style campaigns, like against the Giants, Storm.
Against the Giants is the other one I was thinking of.
No, there's an actual name.
Storm King's Thunder.
Storm King's Thunder, yes.
Yeah, sorry, that was just
previous episode, which is like 9 years old at this point. But anyway,
hey, look at the legs on us. Yeah, there are two places where Rangers can kind of shine in fifth
they
ed.
can if you're in the right part of Storm King's Thunder, but
yeah,
there's a lot of a travelogue feel to the way Storm King's Thunder is laid out, where you could hex crawl your way through the map and do every you could do that, but also you could just say, all right, the road leads to City A, City B, and Weird Encounter C. Pick one of those and head towards it. And
even the people playing Rangers don't really want to do that.
That's sort of the thing.
They're like, Rangers on paper are amazing for a Jack London style adventure. The problem is, those tend to be a single resourceful person struggling against the elements of nature.
Yeah.
You're in a party and no one else wants to do this. Ranger is the hacker. Ranger's the decker from Shadowrun. It's like,
he's got one mechanic. It's his. He loves it so much.
Yeah,
but
it's going to take forever to play it out. So we're not going to. Here, you do it. It's fine. You make it through the wilderness bit. Okay. Now we should talk about. So when did they become spellcasters? That was kind of in
No,
there.
that
It
was in the very
was always
beginning
there, but
because they were.
later on, right? Because what I've noticed is that every edition, spellcasting has come in as a sort of a utility crutch for Rangers earlier and earlier.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what I say, they've always had spells as a power, but whereas the fourth and first edition, that was a later game thing. It's like again part of this like level 8, level 10 power switch over. They would get, as I say, druid or some magic user spells, etc., etc. And they would be limited both. But that was more we need to give them another cool thing. What cool things do we give? Well, we have spells lying around, so I guess just these spells seem appropriate, so give them this list of spells and let them have at it, or what have you. Seems to be more of a thing. But yes, as it went on, first off, they fixed up their crunchy, thrown together spell list and gave a more cohesive spell list to the Ranger. But as it went on, and again, I feel like Fourth Ed didn't have spells as much. It would made them more martial, but also everything in Fourth Ed kind of acted the same way as a spell, so it was hard to notice. But yeah, in the third ed, the fifth ed jump, again, they were trying to figure out this hunter's mark mechanic because they were moving from having favorite enemy and passive bonuses to having hunter's mark and really bringing an idea of the ranger as this pick one guy, ruin their day thing. But they didn't want to commit to just have it be it's always on. It is just you could just do that. That's just a thing you can do. They were still enamored with the idea of resource management as a very important thing to prevent martial characters going nuts. And as someone who, in a long-running D&D campaign, played a wilderness rogue for, from like level 3 to like we end up like level 15. You're not being fair to the Ranger Man. Having always on sneak attack does not solve all your problems. It was never unbalanced that I was able to jump into a shark's throat, rearrange his esophagus and jump out of a second mouth. It was a weird campaign.
Shark, perfectly normal.
Yeah, what I'm saying is they couldn't. They had always on damage buff characters, and they also had the ranger who suddenly was shackled to using a spell. I guess they probably thought that they'd done such a good job with the paladin, where they'd had the bright idea of smite evil and paladin spells. They're the same thing. Let's just use them both. And I guess they applied the same logic to the ranger, but the result was that a lot of the handy tricks of a ranger of being able to just always have a snare trap prepared or to pass without trace, these were all now in conflict with the Rangers, being able to do anything useful in combat ability. Because, like, a paladin that paladins don't tend to use their spells outside of combat. Their spells are combat buffs, especially now that detect evils and that well ability. So if if you asking a ranger, you're asking a paladin, do you want to hit do you want to smite evil, or do you want to give the entire party plus D4 damage against evil things? That's not a apples and oranges thing. That is, what flavor of bonus to damage do you want? Whereas for the ranger, you're asking them to have any combat bonuses at all, or do anything rangery, because they haven't. They had they're trying to come up with these rangery abilities, and they put them into stuff like favorite terrain and whatever the one about always finding foraging things, and these are abilities that
Natural
never come.
Explorer, yeah. Well, it's Natural Explorer in 5th Ed 2014, and it is Deft Explorer.
Yes,
no, Deft Explorer is really watered down. It's actually Deft Explorer is you get some skills and you know 2 languages.
Yeah, yeah. These are
They pretty much cut it out, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is they haven't found the balance between the ranger is a skilled person who's at home and natural in the wilderness environment, and the other problem where it is 2024. A combat class can't just be a guy with big numbers. They have to have add-on damage buffs and triggered abilities and etc. etc. I mean, the fighters having similar issues where the combat math does not favor just I swing sword at man. You have to have extra feats, extra fighting styles, crit bonuses, and all the other nonsense that fighters need to have. But with the fighter and the paladin, they can just say, okay, this is a 100% combat class. Let's just give them 100% combat abilities. But the ranger is trying to, well, he's a person of 2 worlds. He is, as much as he's a defender of civilization working in the wilderness, he is also a frontline combat class working in a environment where also you need skills and spells to deal with problems sometimes. And I don't know if they've ever gotten that dichotomy right.
Yeah, it seems to swing back and forth. And I think a large part of it kind of is because it's so hard to express mechanically those kind of live off the land, favorite enemy, never get lost, never go hungry kind of.
Okay, so here's the thing I want to say about that. We're dealing with this sort of civilization versus nature idea. But that idea in itself has also got more complicated over the world, where it's no longer a clear-cut idea that, what is outside the town walls is automatically bad things that at some point the great lights of civilization have to bring under control. That was very much a medieval idea based out of pastoralism, and then Tolkien, with his hatred of industrialization, kind of codified that into the fancy lexicon. But in modernity, we're seeing much of a reversal of that, where civilization is one of the causing problems, and nature is something that needs to be protected. And this is where you get the sort of idea that druid is a wonderful eco-terror. Yeah.
It's like, I can't understand why more people don't get this. Like, they're rangers and druids should, if they're not kind of working in an Interpol style way, they should probably be at each other's throats as two sort of two security agencies that are both vying for dominance. And there's a kind of a frictional edge there between them.
Well, how was that 70s TV show where one guy was meant to be KGB and there was CIA?
Something like that. Hilarious buddy cop comedy with geopolitical undertones.
Yeah. But
okay,
I guess what I'm trying to get at is that the mythical background that we discussed at the start is in itself also in a kind of a flux, where the ranger is kind of still that good guy, but also the knightly elements of him have kind of been pushed aside as we've gotten more into the Drizzt word, and being Robin Hood all the time is cool element, and the knightly aspects have sort of been pushed aside as we've gotten less and less. Well, partly because we were less and less impressed by having I'm secretly a knight as a character point, but also because we've Paladin has just taken that entire archetype and just made it itself, and there's no space. Even fighters can't be knights these days because of just how much Paladin has taken up the knight energy. And I guess what I'm saying is, like, as much as we agreed as a hive mind of humanity that Rangers are cool and there's something to them, the specifics of what that something is have gotten fuzzier and fuzzier, and it's become harder and harder for people to mechanically express that, particularly in a game like Fifth Ed, where they're afraid to limit the GM's approach to how the GM runs the games in any way, and even where the GM wants, please help me run my game. They're terrified of actually limiting that, and therefore they can't put in hex crawl rules or starvation mechanics or what have you, and make those things a core part. They can't bring themselves to do that, and that means there's nothing to latch onto for the ranger, and the ranger therefore has to fumble around looking for a place in the party mechanically, even though in fiction we all can say, yeah, that sounds like a ranger. Yeah, it sounds like the ranger should have this, and this. That's all sounds cool.
Thing is, you're wrong.
Okay.
That's the great thing about the newest edition of D&D. You're wrong. Because we can find a concrete place to express the rangeriness of rangers mechanically. You know what's coming. Just let this happen. It's easy. Just make them use Hunter's Mark more. That's what defines Ranger now. That's their thing. I've 2014 Ranger and 2024 Ranger open here in a couple of tabs, and I've just done a word search. How many times did you say Hunter's Mark is mentioned in the 2014 Ranger?
I think one just as an entry on the spell list for the Ranger. I don't think it was ever a core mechanic. It was just a thing that was hidden inside the spell list in 2014, and if you didn't cast it, you were a moron, and people would tell you were a moron.
Because that's
whereas I suspect, yeah. Whereas
it's not mentioned once. It's not even mentioned once.
Yeah, and in 2014, I assume there's like 10 different entries for it.
2024, it is 7 mentions specifically in the. It is probably the most mentioned mechanical thing in the entire Ranger description. 24, like this idea that this is Ranger now, Hunter's Markman. I'm going to play a Hunter's Markman. Is basically what has stuck in my craw ever since I read the class description a couple of months back. I just cannot believe it. But this is, if you take away everything else, and you need to define classes, but to do something, right? What is a class? It's a miserable pile of hit points and features. Then you are playing Hunter's Markman, and it is as simple as that. Probably because, as you say, a 2014 Ranger, if you were building an optimized Ranger, casting Hunter's Mark just made sense. You could cast spells. This was a spell you could cast. It's only available for Rangers, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. I expect there's like some class or other that can exploit the way to getting it.
You can borrow spells from other class.
Yeah, Bard. There's probably some Bard build that is like uses Hunter Mark, but it's like
a better Ranger.
Yeah, but Bard. Bard's just like that.
Because so much more of your Bard class is dedicated to things that actually matter. Like in terms of party support, handing out buffs and things is way better than, but don't worry, I can make some more rabbit stew than we would have otherwise been able to make, and our socks won't be quite as wet at the end of the day. So it's like that is what Ranger is now. It's Hunter's Markman. I've seen Defense of the Ranger. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You want to get the lowdown on the different classes in new edition D&D. There's plenty of YouTubers out there who've done work, and I'm sure if we wait another 6 months, the Alexandrian will probably write up something. But okay, I think I think it is kind of lamentable that a class fantasy that, while a little hard to nail down, it's sort of like you know one when you see one. You kind of know a Ranger archetype when you see one. Regardless of however many Panthers might be following them, but yeah, as an expression of that fantasy, it feels like one of the poorest attempts yet, and we've been sliding further and further away from the kinds of games where Rangers are actually relevant, and that's a topic for another time. You and the and them being kind of mechanically interesting as
Here's the
opposed to
part of the issue is in terms of like mythological fiction, we've sort of gone away from the time when every hero was meant to be a little bit of a ranger. As I said, we like back in the time of Finn McCool and the Fianna, the expectation was that if you couldn't survive in the wilderness, there was no way for you to be a hero because you'd get 3 steps out of town and get eaten by wolves. So having wilderness mastery was a generically heroic archetype, and we see that carry through at least until um, Lord of the Rings, but in Lord of the Rings, we're then introduced the idea of, well, we have these hobbits who need to get to a certain mountain. They're not going to get there on their own, but, well, actually, they do about half the way distance their own because of... Anyway.
Giant eagles will fly them there. It'll be all done by Christmas.
But the thing is, everyone in the Lord of the Rings party has basic survival skills. See Samwise with his potatoes and all that. So no one in the Fellowship is like complete. They're not going to starve to death if you leave them in the middle of the Misty Mountains for 2 days. But they still need Aragorn as the ranger to take the lead in that. They need someone to be the best at it.
I mean, Merry and Pip will find a keg and some weed. No food, but they'll be smoking their heads off.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is we're no longer in a paradigm where people are no longer expected to have wilderness skills, and therefore any adventure that requires someone to have wilderness skills is a non-starter, because it takes one party of, it's 3 wizards and the fighter is a rapier specialist, and all of a sudden, you're lost in the wilderness somewhere. Well, I guess you all died in 2 days before you even get to the dungeon. You know, these are the kinds of because we're intended to have. I mean, there's a whole other topic here about is D&D meant to be an everything game or just the most things game?
At the point where our topic starts to ooze out into the edges, I think we should probably call it a day. I'm strongly considering getting a Marga hat made, make all Rangers great again. But
I'm sure no one will confuse your messaging at all.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Those eagle-eyed folks among you will instantly, be able to pick it out, and there'll be no confusion, and I won't become anyone's favorite enemy. I certainly won't be hunter's marked. But with all of that said, look, folks, this is 2 guys' opinions, and we'd love to hear from you on our Discord. Come join our Discord, link in the show notes. But look, you traipsed us all the way out into this wilderness, warlord, so why don't you get us home?
I better hope that I roll well in the survival check then, because otherwise there's no other mechanics to get us home, unless you have a teleportation spell, which probably just the GM will probably just throw one at us just as a mercy, rather than deal with starvation mechanics. We're fine, right?
We'll be grand. Yeah, I know a good recipe for shoe leather. Okay, and on that note, this party's over. Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. Join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license. But you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye. I guess the problem with all that is there's no endpoint for this. There's no. I'm not sure there's unless you're going to revert people to playing a different type of game. In which case, you should probably go and write a different kind of game.
Yeah.
If D&D can no longer do hex crawl or points of light in the darkness or West Marches style games, then it's probably time for someone to write a
I feel
campaign.
like
or
there
a-
have. Here's the thing. I feel
or-
like the OSR community will come breathlessly up to you and say that they're mechanically absent.
Do I have to talk to those people?
They certainly probably got the best hex crawls. I don't know if they've got the best hex crawling mechanics, but they do have many multi-page think pieces on how to design hex crawls and run hex crawls, and it goes on like this.
They're going to love my Marga hats. All right, we're definitely stopping it now.
Yeah.